Welcome to the PS Dental Podcast, where we discuss dentist stories from their paths to dentistry to their lessons along the way. I'm your host, Ryan McGarvey, the proud son of a dentist. Today, we're thrilled to be speaking with Dr. Kelley Brummett of Conservation Dentistry in Duluth, Georgia. Dr. Brummett has a fascinating journey that spans from springboard diving on a full ride scholarship at the University of Kansas, where she was a two-time Big 8 champion, to a robust career in both nursing and dentistry. She holds a BA in communications and a BS in nursing, and has worked in cardiac and psychiatric care nursing before earning her doctorate of medicine in dentistry from the Medical College of Georgia. Dr. Brummett is committed to lifelong learning in dentistry, dedicating time to her family and fostering a mindset of growth. In this episode, we dive deep into Kelley's career path, her passion for dentistry, and the significant mentors who have shaped her journey. We also explore how her background in nursing has influenced her approach to dental care and her continuous pursuit of education. I think you guys will really enjoy this conversation, which is packed with wisdom that can help you in your dental practice as well as in life. Without further ado, here's our interview with Dr. Kelley Brummett. Welcome to the PS Dental Podcast. We're here with my client and friend, Dr. Kelley Brummett. Kelley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. Thank you very much. How are you?
I am amazing. Always a pleasure to see that face and get a chance to talk to you. So let's get started. I'm excited to hear about your dental journey. So, early life and education. You were a springboard diver at the University of Kansas. Can you share how it helped your academic and professional journey, how it may have affected your life at the University of Kansas and then how it affected your path?
Yes. So I got the awesome experience to get a full ride scholarship at the University of Kansas a long time ago. And, I started diving when I was 8 years old. It was something that I just gravitated to before I even knew how to swim. And I was just probably a little daredevil. And it was something that really, it did really help me just discipline, resilience, winning, losing, fear, overwhelming, all those things that you learn in the athletics. And and then it brought me to college on a full ride scholarship, which I was very blessed to have. And then it was just a great experience.
Yeah. I'm curious, in terms of your diving, is there a particular move that was your specialty?
I would say, I did 1 meter and 3 meter springboard.
Okay.
And so 1 meter was my fave. Probably on 1 meter, a back somersault with 1.5 twists was a very popular, a 1.5 with 2 twists. And then just all the flips and things that you get to do.
That's crazy. So you said backwards somersault with 1.5 twists?
Yeah.
So you would go forwards and jump backwards?
So you stand backwards on the board. Mm-hmm. And then you do kind of a half somersault and you twist and then you enter the water. And then you can do the same thing on 3 meter, but you dive in. So a lot of things transfer from 1 meter to 3 meter. Uh-huh. And, from 2.5s to, you did a lot of, on 3 meter, you do more like back 2.5, reverse 2.5. I'm so old that the men were doing 3.5s, the women were not. Now the women are doing crazy stuff in the Olympics, but yeah. So a lot of training, a lot of learning, a lot of growth, a lot of disappointment.
as with sports.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding. You mentioned that when you got into diving when you were a kid, the fact that you were diving before you learned how to swim, I think is pretty unusual, given that when you dive, typically you have to swim afterwards. I'm curious, have you always had like a daredevil streak to you?
I think I have. Yeah, I remember when I was 7, I would con my sisters into taking me over to the diving board, and I would jump off, and they would push me over to the side. And so that's where that came in. And then, yeah, I think I have kind of a hey, somebody's got this idea, let's go do it, and then we'll
Yeah.
figure it out later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be a little more stressful. But yeah, I think I'm less daring than I am now. But yeah, I think I'm pretty open to a lot of things. Like my son wants to go paragliding. There's a place here in Georgia, and so we would have somebody with us. It's not skydiving, but there's a similarity. And so I'm like, yeah, I'd do that.
Oh my gosh. You're the coolest mom ever.
So we just got to figure out a time to do it.
Yeah.
So,
But paragliding is the thing where you have the giant like kite above you and you run off the edge of a cliff, right?
yes.
Oh
Yes.
my
And
gosh.
I think there's some motor with it, and somebody's with you, so you're guided.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's the only way to do it. It's like I need someone for both of us. But yeah.
Wow. And you also include the fact that you and your husband Darren went on the sailboat less than a year ago, and you guys went out into the Caribbean Ocean with a couple of buddies who know how to sail and who had done it before. And you just said, let's go ahead and do this thing.
Let's go find out what that's about. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think sometimes adventure's fun.
Yeah. Is that a good outlet for you, would you say, as a variant and a contrast to what you do in the dental office on a daily basis?
I think I could say that. Yeah, because there's a lot of, I wouldn't say, I think that's the misnomer of dentistry. Dentistry is not boring. Dentistry is not the same thing every day. It's definitely very, it has its ebbs and flows. But yeah, I think sometimes, just that adventure, that exciting, the unknown is a little thriving.
Yeah, that is so cool. So in terms of education, going back to your college degrees, you pursued degrees in both communications and nursing.
Correct.
Interesting blend. How did you come across communications and nursing? Why did you choose those two together?
So in my dieting career, I was very confused. I went in my education path. I took a lot of sciences. I took a lot of communication. There was a point when I did a lot of speaking, and it was something that I found I enjoyed. And I was kind of trying to figure out how to incorporate that maybe from a business standpoint to working in a field where maybe you're involved with connecting businesses like mergers or acquisitions, where you're taking two things together and being that kind of consultant piece to help bridge the communication gap. And then, trying to figure life out, it was really the journey that took me from communications into nursing was the event at a diving meet that we were competing against Colorado. It was my junior year, and we always called it on deck. So whoever's on the board it's their time, and then the person that's waiting is on deck. So I'm below the board, and we were on the 3-meter, and we were at University of Kansas, my home, and she hit the board and collapsed. And so since I was under the board, I slipped into the water and helped pull her forward to the side of the pool while the EMTs came and got her on the board, because didn't know, she did have a head injury, but didn't know to what extent. But she was conscious. And as they exited her out of the pool, I watched that experience, and I had previously I worked a summer in a hospital as a nurse's aide. And so I watched that event, and the way I felt inside, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to help people. So I went down the path of, okay, I was a nurse's aide. I'll go to nursing school. I had enough to graduate on time with my communications degree. So that's why I completed that. And then I just needed like a couple of extra classes because I had been taking so many variations of classes from sciences to, you know, the humanities. So I only needed a couple more classes. So then I went to nursing school. And yeah, it was a desire to, I found myself in that moment of that, you know, I think I work well in a crisis moment. I think I work well in in being able to navigate, uh, what you need to do in order to make something happen for somebody else related to an injury, related to an event. And
Mhm.
so that's what led me down that nursing path.
Yeah, there's certainly one way to help people with mergers and communications, right? Like there's a lot of money to be made with that. And obviously a lot of lives are enhanced that way. But of course, we don't have anything without our health. And if you are in a position as a nurse to be able to help people with their health, especially when they are in these dire circumstances, there's really no more valuable profession or role to play in someone's life than helping them when they're on the brink of danger.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, you said you were kind of a daredevil, and there are elements to it that's a little bit exciting. I don't know. Would that be accurate to say that you're blending like you're a part of your personality as well as being a helpful person?
Mm-hmm. I would think so because yeah, it's one thing whenever it's one thing to get that energy, that excitement whenever you get to like, hey, we're going to go zip lining. Cool. You can put the helmet on, you get your gear on, and you know what that feeling's like.
Yeah.
But then it's one thing to say, okay, you can utilize that same kind of energy to help focus an event that's happening around you to help provide some safety for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And as a nurse, you're not making decisions necessarily for that person's diagnosis or their treatment, but you're recognizing signs and symptoms that happen in front of you to figure out how to navigate within the team aspect of working with the doctors, the therapists that you're working with, and that's
it's super hands-on too.
Yeah, and probably the other piece of that is the collaboration piece. Working with multiple people, there's not just one person that's responsible or everything's this probably goes back to my athletics. It's that team environment.
Mm-hmm.
You lean on other people to help see something, hear something, think through something, help somebody with moving forward towards that health aspect.
Wow. So interesting. Wow. So how, obviously, we know, spoiler alert, you became an amazing dentist at some point.
Yeah.
How long were you a nurse, and where were you stationed, and what was the nursing experience like, and how did you eventually transition? Who influenced you? What happened that influenced you? Why did you change your trajectory?
So when I was a nurse, I worked for about 5 years. So not a long career, but I worked 5 years at the Medical College of Georgia and at a psychiatric hospital for children in Augusta, Georgia. That is where my husband was doing his radiology residency there. So yeah, so Darren was working as a resident, I was working as a nurse. But I will say that when we went there, because there's so many professional schools there was still this like, I did love what I was doing, but I did have this ache for something else, something in my mind that, I didn't know at the time, but probably now I can say gave me more autonomy. So, so I kept taking some classes, trying to figure out, do I go the nurse practitioner route, PA? Do I apply to medical school? And so because we were so poor, Darren's a resident. I'm working 2 jobs. So I worked at the hospital. The first floor I worked on was ENT, urology, and we had 2 rooms dedicated to oral surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked at the psych hospital, which were 3-year-olds to 17-year-olds that were wards of the state of South Carolina, Georgia. And they basically were either in trouble or needed to be institutionalized to some degree. So I worked both of those jobs so we could survive. Because that's what you're
This is little thing called survival.
Yeah, that's what you're doing when you're fresh out of school and trying to make your way. And I was taking organic too, actually, and I was studying. And the oral surgeons were asking me questions one day, and they said, "Well, have you ever thought about dentistry?" And I hadn't. As a kid, I never had a bad dental experience. I never minded going to the dentist, although I always had a cavity. I blame the 80s. I blame Pepsi, and I blame High C, and all the junk food that was popular. So when they talked to me, I was like, "Yeah, no, I haven't." But I was crafty. I wouldn't say I was artsy, but I was crafty. And so my mom and I always did things growing up together, whether it was making clothes or it was, cross stitching or we actually did woodworking. So 'cause she was big on, she liked to do little shows. So she would sell her woodworking art. So I learned to do that with her. And
you were her little assistant.
Yeah, I was her little assistant.
That's so cute.
So it was a great thing for us to share together. And so I just got to thinking about it. And one day I went to the dental school and just had a conversation, just kind of checked it out. And I ended up taking the DAT. I only had organic 2 left to take. And next thing I knew, I'm getting a letter that I got accepted into dental school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Life changes so quickly.
Yeah. So my second job in nursing was cardiac, and that's what I was doing when I was waiting to decide or get into dental school. So, and cardiac's what I did love. Those patients were awesome because they were very self-sufficient. So they were great to work with. However, they were very sick. And they were oftentimes very repeat patients because of just the chronic conditions they were in. But that was an area that I really enjoyed working in. And so it was like, do I stay here and move down that avenue, or do I go to dental school? And I think, being in the cardiac unit, it's a telemetry floor. You have a lot of responsibilities with those patients. And we got to do a lot of involvement with the physicians in the care of the patient and giving them a lot of feedback. And I think that's what drove me down the path of dentistry, because that autonomy piece, that's what I was kind of realizing, that I wanted to know more why things were happening rather than what and how to react to what was happening.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, what I hear is that you joined nursing and you were taking this path because there was from what you witnessed during the diving incident, is that you saw this really, really cohesive team aspect to things. But then what you discovered after 5 years of being in nursing is that you were actually looking for something with more autonomy, because you were looking for the reason of why, as opposed to just doing things for the sake of doing them because someone told you to do them. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it's fairly accurate. I mean, it's, as a nurse, I mean, you're very equipped to identify what is happening with a patient and how you need to respond to that, which is a sign and symptom philosophy. That's and you're part of that team, but you're not making any, diagnostic decisions. You have nursing diagnoses, but that's not a diagnostic decision for the physician. So as I got to know the physicians and I got to kind of understand, and of course my husband's a resident, so get to hear and see the things that he's doing. It was like, I was lacking a little bit of that autonomy piece.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let me circle back. You mentioned that you were taking on 2 jobs at the beginning of your relationship with your now husband, Darren. I know this story. I love this story, but I want you to tell for our listeners the first time that you met Darren and how that slowly became a marriage.
Yeah. So we met, we both went to University of Kansas, but did not know each other. Our paths crossed because he ran track and of course with my diving. And I was first year nursing student. He was first year medical student. We were actually studying in the same location, this little student center that everybody would go study in. And we had a mutual friend that I was talking to. He stepped in and it was kind of like, And so slowly we kept bumping into each other. And then he asked me out and we went to this little cute pizza place that was just down the street I rented this little house in Kansas City. And we had pizza and he walked me home and it was like, something's different with this guy. and and next thing, 30 years later, we've been married. So we dated, we got married in 2 years and then we've been together ever since.
Just celebrated your 30th anniversary in style in Italy. Yes. Love is real, folks. Love is real. I love it. Tell Darren I say hello when you get a chance, by the way.
I will.
Really cool guy. All right. So in terms of your dental education and career, throughout our lives, we come across people that we can, label as a mentor, label as someone that we looked up to, someone to strive for, someone to be more similar to. Throughout this process of finding dentistry, growing in dentistry, have you had mentors and significant people who have helped guide you along the way? And who are they and what have they helped you with?
Yes, I have. And I say it like that, I have so many. And I think
it's a good thing.
I think sometimes you have, through my career so I've been practicing now 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think the further you get into your career, the more you realize how many mentors you had along the way that you didn't realize at the time.
Huh.
So, I can go back to dental school and one of my professors, Dr. Mike Myers, not the actor. And we were always scared of him, but he was the type of guy that he was a restorative dentist and the restorative part of the school. And he was the type of guy that when you saw his name on the schedule, whenever you were going into clinic, you were like, oh, but at the same time, you were like, okay, I'm going to get an education. Because he was very fair. He was very tough, but you learned. And I remember, maybe not quite 10 years ago, 8 or 10 years ago, I just had the crazy thought of him. And I sent him a letter one day just saying, you come across my mind often when I'm practicing because he really instilled some of the principles in me. And he was also one of the people that, even though he was really tough, he was very fair and I really respected him. And so I just wanted him to know the impact he had on me. And because it wasn't like he and I it wasn't like we went and had lunch together. It wasn't like one of the professors that I saw often. It was literally in the moment of a clinic and navigating through school. And so that was really cool for me to kind of, it's like realizing that there are people in your life that at times it's helpful to touch them.
Yeah.
And let them know the impact they had on you because they might not. And that the impact they still have on others, how beneficial that is.
Did he respond to the letter?
He did. He actually did, which I was really surprised.
Were you nervous
when
you saw his letter? Was it a letter response or an email or a text?
It was an email. Yeah.
Oh, you probably saw his name and I would have been freaking out.
It's like, wait, he really responded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just realize, that they remember you, one.
Yeah.
And then two, he just thanked me and said that was, he really appreciated hearing that because not many dental students contact their professors or the people that they've worked with after the fact. And so sometimes they don't ever hear from anybody, he said.
Wow.
So it's almost like you don't know, I wonder where so-and-so went, or I wonder what so-and-so's doing.
Yeah.
And he invited me to be a visiting faculty, which, it's a volunteer position. It's not, that's something that I enjoyed doing, which, that was in the midst of me getting into the teaching aspect of dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoyed going back to the clinic and giving back to that degree. And he was a big piece of me, because I did not love dental school. I did not love the browbeating. I did not love that. I was an older person. I had gone through some things, and it was like, I kind of was a little resistant to some of that. And in hindsight, it was like, we really had a good education. It's kind of like, if I could have told my younger self, listen, let your pride come down, just learn, step into it. A lot of people have pride and a lot of people are trying to, puff up, but there's something to learn.
Yeah.
And I did. But I think, it's the typical young student trying to find their way.
Being the older, younger person is always a tough position to be in because you have, you're older than other people. So you feel like you should know more. Reality is that you don't. But you want to puff your chest out and kind of show off as the elder statesman. But the reality is that you're still young and there's still, as in throughout life, the older I get, the more I know, there's less that I know, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So that must have been a very interesting balance to be the older person during dental school with all these young, energetic, hopeful, optimistic people. It was probably pretty exhausting for you. That's just human nature, I think.
Right. It is. And I think it's, it's just like watching my kids now who are 21 and 22. You're at a time in your life where you're like, in all honesty, there were times I sat in dental school and said, was nursing that bad?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, why am I sitting here?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're trying to figure out, did you make a right decision? Are you moving in the right direction? Is it going to be what you think it's going to be?
Mm-hmm.
My son and he's doing an internship this summer and we're having these conversations and, so it's not necessarily that it's the rite of passage, but these are the journeys that you go through and discovery and you keep discovering.
Yep.
So he was a huge mentor that I didn't realize how much he impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time I prep a crown, there are just basic principles that I still, hold to that he was responsible for.
Wow.
And those are things that when I'm teaching, I carry those forward, even though it seems like, oh, well, that doesn't pertain today. That was 20 years ago. And it's like, no, those principles are still valid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Everything's based in the fundamentals.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's so many people through my Pankey journey.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I went down to Pankey I cannot name them all. So if this little snippet gets out there, please forgive me, anybody. But, early in my career, two people very much influenced me. And that was Todd Davis, who invited me to a study club that he and Rich Green were leading. And when I first met Rich Green, I remember I was listening to him and I was smiling and I was nodding. And he pulled me aside in a break and was like, do you always smile? Do you always nod? and I was like, you're just saying things that I had been a couple years into owning a practice. I had a 2 and a 3-year-old at home. I had my husband who's a physician in a group. Life's happening. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I'm just figuring out that there is a way I can practice dentistry, but I'm not exactly sure what way that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I loved about the beginning of Pankey's, my experience of my educational experience there, is that it was the first community, whether it was in study club or it was while I was going through the courses, where there was more to talk about than just a technique. It was about, okay, who are we as individuals? And that was important to me because that was probably the gist of my diving career. I mean, from the time I was, especially in junior high, learning how to meditate, learning how to calm your soul in order to stand on the diving board and be in a competition.
Wow. It's way ahead of your time. Meditation,
yeah. This was the 80s.
Yeah.
We're talking tapes.
Yeah. We're just getting into meditation now in the 2020s. That's incredible.
Yeah. And so it's like learn and feedback. Like, I grew up in a very small town. And so my swimming coach was the diving coach. So I literally would videotape myself to coach myself because my coach only had a limited amount. And that was in order to give yourself that feedback, to be honest with yourself and experience that, like, okay, that wasn't so great, but this you did well, this you can do better, and try this next time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from coaches. So I have a coaching background, and that's why the mentors that have impacted me have been so powerful, because I feel like I need that. I need that reflection. And Todd Davis, 100%, a huge reflector. He'll tell you what it is.
Wow.
I use his little story to this day of when he and I met, and to whenever I'm lecturing or presenting to different things. And Rich, just, being around someone who actually learned under Dr. Pankey and getting to hear the stories firsthand and getting to hear the impact and the way he navigated his life, and then being able to talk to them. That's the thing about a mentor. It's like, it's being able to be real from life to dentistry, which in my world, there's not a separation. Like when some people say, business is a business and life is life, it's like, I'm the same person, whether I'm at work or whether I'm at home. My personality, everything, I am who I am.
Yeah.
And not that I'm not discovering that every day, who I am, because I don't think I know 100% all of who I am.
We never do. Yeah.
Yeah. But the reality is I'm me, whatever situation I'm in, and how do I navigate me?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I can be helpful to others, but also to be, to serve.
Mm-hmm. Yep. In order to serve, you have to understand yourself and take care of yourself before you can take care of others. I'm pretty excited to hear you say, I was just looking at my phone to see, I'm taking a class at Pankey this summer, and Dr. Davis is the lead. It's
good. Is it case acceptance?
That's right.
Yeah, good. Awesome. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I'm excited. But hearing that he's one of your main mentors is cool. I'm interested to see what you mean exactly by reflecting. And he's definitely a reflector. I guess I'll find that out, whatever that means this summer. But it sounds like I have a lot to look forward to. Are there any other mentors that that have taken you down your path as well?
Yeah, I can say, Gary DeWood, Leanne Brady, Mary Osborne, Joan Undershoots, people that like Kevin Minch, Glenda Owen, Rick Aiken, my study club group of fellas and Adriana Asparakis is her last name. But
unreal last name.
And even though we're colleagues, all these people have influenced me in some degree and still do to this day. And there's more, but and it's exciting to even see these young docs coming up. I can say that because I'm old now. it's an exciting, it's an exciting profession to be in.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's really cool to hear the long list of mentors that you've had that have impacted you. I think that we're lucky if we have 1 to 2 people that impact us, but to almost, like you said, like Pankey being one of the first communities that you experienced since being a part of the diving team, it's pretty clear how much value you can get when you find a place that supports you, not only technically with your skills, but also your values.
Well, and I'll just add what's interesting too is, I'll say it. I've already said I'm old. I'm 55. So I've been practicing 22 years and I'm still trying to learn and to gain skills and knowledge and all that from who I am, but also what I'm doing and with who I'm doing it, which includes my team. And so like Buzz Raymond, he's one of my newest mentors who comes to the office to stare over my shoulder. And those are things that, again, it goes back to my coaching days. That helps me, is to have that continued interaction. And I would say, I hope these mentors are willing to keep working with me until the day I stop.
Yeah. It's a great affirmation and continued way of just learning and motivating and camaraderie. Like there's just a million different ways that would positively affect a person. That is awesome. Let's pivot. Mm-hmm. Conservation Dentistry, your dental practice in Duluth, Georgia. Interesting name. How did you come up with it?
So it was in honor of Dr. Clayton Davis. So he, on his business card, he had the definition of conservation and about sharing with his patients how his hope was to conserve what they had, and to maximize and benefit them. And so when I bought the practice in 2020 of December, that was one of the things I noticed on his card, and I wanted to honor that. And so use that as the business name. Mm-hmm. And I do believe in that because I oftentimes share with patients, we're trying to help patients understand their risks, help them restore back as best as can be in their, functional aspects and their comfort. Mm-hmm. And restoration, conservation kind of all go together because you're really trying to utilize what we have versus let's just wipe it out and start over.
Yeah. Do what we possibly, the best, a lot of that is Pankey philosophy, of course, whereas try to conserve as much as you possibly can of the natural smile, because that's the healthiest, best way to do things and the best recipe for long-term good oral care. I love the name. And it's really cool that it's an ode to the previous owner as well, who obviously is a very, very well-regarded dentist in his own right and deserves all of that recognition and honoring, which is so cool.
Absolutely.
If you could think about, this is a tough question because you've had a really wonderful career so far of 20 plus years. Could you give me the most memorable or impactful moment of your career in the past 20 years? Like, is there a moment that you've had a patient in chair that has really impacted you, or a piece of work that you did that is memorable above the rest for whatever reason?
I do. I have a lot. They're kind of like, as they're floating around in my head right now.
Yep.
But I'll be honest, probably one in particular was one that I thought was a failure. I had a patient who had an existing 5-unit bridge that the center anchor of the bridge was failing. And so you go in to uncover it and you try to repeat what was done before, only to discover that a tooth isn't going to make it. And you need to switch, and you kind of you didn't really have that conversation. And so now you're having a different conversation. And I remember driving home after work one day and just feeling like, how could I have known? How could I have caught that? How could I have been better prepared?
Mm-hmm.
Did I let her down? Because now she's got to spend more money. Now she's got to spend more time, potentially more discomfort. And I remember looking in my rearview mirror at myself and thinking, why am I so hard on myself?
Wow.
And so I went home and I continued to kind of think about it, but I tried to kind of set it aside. And the next morning I got up and it was a Friday, so I didn't normally work on Fridays. And I texted her just to say, because I had actually extracted her tooth that day because the tooth was too far gone. And so I was referring her out to oral surgery and we were going to go an implant route. You know, we had to switch gears and we just didn't know exactly what was going on yet. But I texted her just to see how she was doing after the extraction. And I honestly don't remember exactly, but in my mind, I wanted to just apologize, like as if I had done something wrong. And what was crazy is she immediately texted me back and said, "I'm doing great. I don't have any pain. I'm having coffee and I'll have my appointment with oral surgeon and we'll chat whenever I'm done with that." And I'm like, here I am beating myself up. And then she not only said that, she sent me another text right after that, because this was the important piece, and said, "Thank you for taking care of me."
Wow.
And I'm like, here I am thinking I'm stupid. I'm a bad dentist. Oh my goodness. How did I miss this?
Yeah.
You know, how could I have known?
Uh-huh.
And she's doing great and she is thanking me. And it was a realization of, I'll speak for myself. I can't know everything at all times.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm doing my best that I can that day, I need to give myself that grace and also give the space enough to our patients to hopefully I can instill some trust that we can have those open conversations. And instead of it being, you know, a horrible resentment, it's a shared learning piece, and it helped me have different conversations with my patients rather than we can oftentimes, you know, say, "Oh, okay, we're going to do this procedure. We're going to do it on this day. It's going to go like this. And then this is what we're going to wait for. And then this is the end of it."
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is now there are some others that can happen in between.
Mm-hmm.
That we can share. You know, you've had this tooth in your mouth for 20 years. You've had this bridge for over 25 years. I don't know what's under there. I don't know. But I promise I'll walk with you. I'll help you see and know what the possibilities are. And you'll let me know what your desires are.
Right.
It's not just about me always fixing something. And that was probably like the biggest education about fixing. I'm a big believer in helping people understand. And that was my nursing too. When somebody came into the hospital and had a cardiac arrest, had a blockage, and they went and had a cardiac catheterization,
mm-hmm.
that stent can last 6 months.
Temporary.
They might be back.
Come right back.
It might last 5 years.
Yeah.
Honestly, nobody knows. It's all about how does their body respond? What's their medication regimen? What's their daily care?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big eye opener for me. And I connected it to one of Dr. Pankey's stories in his book, the book on philosophy that he and Bill Davis wrote together, where he had 5 cases that he had messed up. He had, they all failed. And he, you know, admitted that in the book and then said that 4 of the 5 stuck with him because they knew he was conscientious enough to figure it out and they would be taken care of. And it was like, okay, so we don't have to have this all figured out. Even Dr. Pankey. And that's just a a huge, and even for our patients, because patients come in and they are disappointed sometimes with the decisions they make. A smoker comes in, they find out they're in a certain situation. I mean, not only is it about money and finances, but it can also be about the fact of the decisions that they made. And so that experience just really helped me realize, take time with people, sit back, and maybe slowly over conversations, you can help people discover what's important to them.
Wow. That is a lot of wisdom, Dr. Brummett. I feel like in life, I think forgiveness is always extremely difficult. What can be even more difficult than that is self-forgiveness. To look yourself in the mirror at the end of a rough day and say, you know what? I did my absolute best. I did what I could, the extent of my knowledge, and it's okay that I don't know everything, but you can be damn sure I'm going to do the best that I can to learn the lesson that needs to be learned and fix the mistake. And I think that for you to acknowledge that and for your patient to be so kind in that moment, and it's amazing what a little bit of kindness from, they don't expect that they're in a position to teach you a lot. They didn't say, I'm going to teach Dr. Brummett a lesson today. And normally that's in an angry way, right? Like, oh, I'm going to teach her a lesson, right? Like this, it just shows how far a little bit of kindness can go. And that, all the different, sub lessons that you've learned from it. Talk about a pivotal moment. That is unbelievable. And thank you for sharing. So you recently at Conservation Dentistry have fully acquired the practice, completely taken over. You're now the sole dentist. Obviously, you took over for a very accomplished dentist whose patients loved him. And rightfully so. What advice would you give to another dentist who is acquiring a practice from a very well-renowned, accomplished dentist? What advice would you give to them? Because I know that while there are so many benefits to acquiring a practice like this, I have no doubt there were challenges. What advice would you give to a dentist in a position like that?
So I think the first thing is know what your goals are for yourself and your family and the purpose behind why you're wanting to acquire something. I would say that's number one. And for me, that was simply answering a question of what gives me energy related to my dental path. The other is being aware that you have a senior dentist, I'll say senior, that, sorry, Clayton, that has a relationship with his patients that's different than yours. And it's been a long relationship. And making sure that you're clear on that transition of the relationship. And I think if you're a newer dentist that you haven't had that many years of practice experience, deciding how the relationship of the practice or the person that you're buying from, how they can help transition that trust of that relationship they've had. And you being open to learning and watching. And not that you're going to do everything the same, because you're not. But I think the biggest key for me is being able to be patient and to know that we had a 3-year agreement, and allowing that transition to take place. And I spent a lot of time around learning about transitions before this acquisition, but there's always for every beginning, there's an ending. And so that person's ending in their career or in what their daily life is like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a middle ground of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And you both, working with another dentist and acquiring a practice, knowing that person's going to leave, retire, and then you're going to be the sole owner. There's a messy middle, and that doesn't have to be horrible. It just means it's the zone that you're working in, and then knowing that there's a new beginning and learn. There's a lot of wisdom to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And then bring in your own. And I think the biggest key is making sure that from the beginning, there's some shared values. And I know one of the things that he and I shared was the fact that we really shared the value of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We shared the value of love.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that even in the midst of disagreements, or maybe that's not how I do it, I wonder why you do it this way, or have you ever considered this? You can always still come back to the fact that we as humans, we have shared values, and we can make decisions out of those of how we want to practice. But I guess I'll just say it again. I think a lot of it is knowing beforehand, being really honest with yourself and being really honest with each other if you can,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just like with a patient. The more that you can have, I know you've heard this, but those unspoken expectations get spoken,
Mm-hmm.
you will have less resentment towards each other. You will have less challenges. And I would say it's nothing different than a marriage where you have to talk. You have to navigate through that with each other.
Mm-hmm.
and be, like you said, you're being gentle,
Right.
for the purpose of serving the patients.
Right. You have a common goal and shared values. And if you can make decisions and have conversations based on those, that certainly helps lead the conversation, because you both know that you can be united instead of battling. You mentioned that you did a lot of research and tried to learn as much as you possibly could before the transition about transitions. How wide would you say that gap was of knowledge from like what you ended up learning versus what you were trying to learn before?
So I sold my practice in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And that transition was the typical dental transition of it didn't go well.
Yep.
And that transition of why I was even selling and what I needed to do in that decision, and reading a book, called Transitions. And it's just understanding that, I talk about this a fair amount too whenever I'm talking with participants down at the Institute. But, a lot of people say they don't like change. Well, I don't really believe that. I think that it's not the change that people don't like. It's what you have to do in order to make a change occur. And so it's the actual doing,
The effort.
And and that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I say, there's an ending to everything. There's an ending when my kids graduated from high school and went off to college.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it's not a wallow, but it's a transition that you kind of need to understand and start experiencing and growing from. And there's a lot of emotions and a lot of things that, man, I wonder if I should have, or what, did we do enough? Did we do this? Did I set them up? Are they, I'm not an empty nester. I'm a bird launcher.
I love that. I'm a bird launcher.
That's not mine. I stole it from somebody who said that.
I love it. You're going to fly whether you like it or not. Get out of here.
You can always come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, and in that that's that know yourself part of what we do down at the Institute, and what I have tried to spend my life learning is, okay, so who am I now? What transition, what piece of my life, what do I still want to become? because I do think that's what life is about becoming.
No doubt. And it's always a process.
Yes.
Okay. So we're running short on time. So I want to touch on a couple of things. Obviously, the Pankey Institute has been very influential and impactful for you in your dental journey. If you could tell me quickly, how did you come across the Pankey Institute? How did you find it? And what kind of impact has it had on you, if you could sum it up?
Yeah. So the Pankey Institute at the time in about 2006 was doing a Grass is Greener campaign. So they were actually coming around to cities, and it was Leanne Brady, it was Steve Ratcliffe, and Gary DeWood.
Mm-hmm.
And they were kind of touching communities and people about what the Institute was teaching. And I went to the event. Well, what was interesting is that was 2 years into me owning my practice. And I remember saying to myself one day after I was still doing an amalgam filling, that, okay, as much as I hated dental school, they gave me a good education. I feel confident in what I'm doing, but what does that look like 5 years from now? Like I'm practicing right now how I was taught in dental school. So what else do I not know?
Right.
So I got this flyer. It was like a postcard type, marketing. And I remember laying it in my office. And then I remember one day I came in, I was working in my office, and I moved a bunch of stuff, and I moved it. And I moved it a couple of times. Well, I happened to look at it like probably the third time, and it was kind of like a God thing where it's like, okay, maybe I need to check into this. So I went to the event. I remember Gary DeWood coming up to me and saying, again, you were nodding a lot while you were in the audience. And again, it's like, yeah, you guys were speaking to me. Like, this is really interesting. And so I went down to the Institute and fell in love with it ever since. And what I would say is, what I hit on earlier is that this was the first place that I experienced in dental education that you could sit with people that had very different ideas, very different experiences, but were willing to actually talk about how it impacted their personal life. Were willing to talk about their finances. Not many, you go sit in a big old auditorium with 1,000 people, no one's talking. You're getting dumped information on. You could socialize, which you feel very lonely. I think you and I mentioned that earlier. You can feel very isolated in dentistry because, yes, you're surrounded by your team, but the aspect of isolation is very strong for dentists. So you had some connections, and you could actually think through, okay, where am I? What do I want? How do I get that? What do I like? What do I not like? Okay, that sounds interesting, but I don't know how to do that. And it just was a place that held me accountable. Because when I got involved in study clubs and these mentors that were impacting me, it was like, okay, it's in the doing. This crazy statement they keep saying. It's not in the knowing, it's in the doing. It was like, okay, that's legit. Yep. And I got to do.
Checks out.
And the more I do, the more I'm going to learn what I don't know.
Yep.
And so I think that's the key. It was like a place where you got some freedom to say, yeah, I don't know. And I've heard about this, or I hate this procedure. I love this procedure. So how do I do more of that? How do I change my schedule so I don't have 30 new patients on my for a month whenever I just want to see 10 that develop into patients that are regularly occurring? It was just this philosophy. And so that was what I discovered, is that I didn't have to practice one way. It was never about practicing like Dr. Pankey. It was never about practicing like Todd Davis or Rich Green or Lee. It was, here are things that I've experienced. Here are things that I've done. Here are things that have impacted me. And I'm that way. I like info. I will take bits and pieces. That's in my Strengths Finder input. It's my top 5. So it's like, okay, how do I incorporate these things into my way of being with my family, with my life that I want to lead, with the adventures I want to have in the midst of doing dentistry. So that's what it was about, and still is to this day.
Wow. It's about acquiring the tools to build out not someone else's idea of a dental practice, but your own, which it's so invaluable. And actually going to Pankey Essentials 1 class last year, I've obviously been in the symposium every year for the past 6 years, but going to the actual class and having young dentists sit there in the class, nodding like you say that you did, just seeing the light bulbs go off for me as a non-dentist was such a fascinating experience that really it's like the birth of a baby almost, where it's almost like a whole different trajectory. You're like, oh, I can do things the way I want to do them. And this is the place where I can learn how to do it. So Dr. Kelley Brummett, thank you so much for spending time with me. This has been filled with wisdom. I have one more question for you. The future. What are your aspirations for the future of conservation dentistry and your involvement with educational institutions and professional organizations moving forward?
Yeah, so a little unknown with conservation dentistry related to the fact that it's like there are days that I think, okay, how old am I and how many more years do I have in me? Like physically and all the above. But so yeah, I mean, I think my overall goal has never changed, really, to be honest, what I would love is to be able to bring somebody in the next maybe year or two, mentor that person if they were a new grad, or have some like-minded collaboration to continue serving the patients, continue developing the culture of the team, and passing that on. And I don't know when, but stepping out of the world of actual dentistry. Well, I mean, that's definitely in my future. I'm past what they call halftime. I mean, I'm in that phase of my life. It's not, I have 30 years of practice. I have much less years to practice, and really defining how I want to practice has been my focus, especially with technology right now. But sharing that with somebody and passing that on is really a hope. And I love to spend time at the Institute in education. I love that piece too, of just sharing the things that I have experienced and growing, because the more that I get to share, I also learn. And it's like, it's a two-way street, which is amazing. And I would love, I don't know. There are times that I think about, consulting, but there's so many smart people in the world that are in dental consulting. I don't know if that's something that I'll ever, move into. I know I have a lot of ideas or things to share.
You have a lot to share. You have a lot to share. There's no doubt about it.
All the things I've done the hard way, not the wrong way, but the hard way. I've done enough of that. But yeah, just to be able to share with others, a path, a future, a hope. Because I mean, that's a lot of it. And then I continue, being able to present here or there is a hope for too, with just different events, again, just to share.
Well, if this conversation is any indication as to your future or what kind of value you can provide sharing, I know you have limitless value, because this conversation has been awesome. Dr. Kelley Brummett, thank you so much for joining us. I have no doubt there are so many nuggets of wisdom in this conversation, and I appreciate you being vulnerable, sharing your experience. Great to see you as always, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.